All right, so I think we're about ready to get started. Good morning. This is Francisco, and today we're going to start our online class number 2, exceptions and job assignment setup. And during the course of the next hour, hour and a half, we're going to learn how to create job assignments, which could be a patrol area that someone is assigned to, or a particular job or work status that someone is in. Now, these assignments can be applied on a daily, weekly, monthly, or permanent basis. This is all information that you will be able to report on and even transmit over to payroll, so we'll talk a little bit about that. We're also going to learn how to create day off and overtime reason codes. Now, these are the time off and overtime reasons that your employees will be using. For time off, we're going to see vacation, sick, personal, things like that. You'll also have funeral leave, bereavement, Fmla might be other examples of things you're going to see under day off reason codes. And we'll learn how to create overtime reasons as well. So these are the reasons why someone works overtime, whether it's staffing shortage, late call, court-related overtime. And so, as is the case with all of our basic setup items, we're going to build these through the desktop application, which is what I currently have loaded up right now on my test database. And we're going to be working under the administration drop-down menu. The first item we're going to look at is job assignments, and I'd like to just talk a little bit about how those work. And to do that, I'd just like to point here at my patrol day shift for September 23rd. And so under this day shift, we see a list of everyone who is scheduled to work, and we even see an example of someone who is out sick for today. Now, aside from assigning someone to their shift, you may choose to add additional assignments. What is it that this person or these guys are doing during the course of their regular work schedule? And there's an interesting tool that we can use here under the supervisor zone. Under a category called Schedule Details. It's called Manage Daily Assignments. And the way this screen works is we select the shift that we want to work with. And over on the left, we see everyone who is scheduled to work on that particular day on that shift. So as you can see, it mirrors what we were seeing on our daily schedule. And over to the right is a list of my job assignments. Now, yours might look a little different than mine. I'm just using generic zones for my patrol areas. And here I just click and drag the person over to the job assignment. And I continue doing that until I have everyone in the positions or job assignments I need them in. And at that point, I can close out. And as soon as the screen has the opportunity to refresh, and these most likely will refresh automatically, you will now see those zones listed to the left of the individual's name. Not only does this allow us to see who's working in a particular area or district on a day-to-day basis, but you will also have reports available to you. So if you ever need to look and see who may have covered a particular area on any day, on any shift, that's information that you're going to be able to get through our system. Now, aside from a work area that someone is assigned to, you will also be able to assign a work status to an employee or groups of employees. And when I say work status, normally we talk about things like OIC, FTO, or light duty. So it's not necessarily a place that we're working or a work area. It's a particular work status that may actually affect our pay. And in other words, you might have a senior officer or a senior employee who may be working as a supervisor, and because of that, their pay might be adjusted. If someone is working as a field training officer, and again, that's something that we want to just track for scheduling purposes, or someone gets additional pay for working in that position, you'll absolutely be able to do that through our system as well. You may also choose to create training and light duty assignments as well. Now, those are interesting because if someone is assigned to light duty or training, they may not count towards your minimum staffing. So we're going to show you how to configure those jobs so that if you end up using them in your organization, you know that it is affecting the schedule the way you need it to. Okay, so let's go to the Administration drop-down menu, and we're going to take a look at the Job Assignment Center. And we're going to select Set Up Jobs. Over on the left, you're going to see the list of my current job assignments, the ones that you see reflected on my day shift. And if I was to highlight one of these, you'll notice that I have a code and a description and a sort number. And so as you create your job assignments, you just have to remember that each one will have to have a code, which is what we're going to use as the label for the schedule itself, a description, which could be 5 characters or less, and that's just the full description of what that assignment is. And if you choose to use a sort number, which you'll notice is not red, so it's not a required field, a sort number is going to allow you to place that job assignment in a particular order. So if there's certain jobs that you're using more frequently than others, you may choose to provide some of those with sort numbers so that they appear at the top of a list ahead of any of the other job assignments which you just may not use as frequently. So for my first example, I'm going to enter just an additional zone, and again, this might be a patrol area or district for your organization. I'm going to keep the code at 5 characters or less. It will not allow me to save it otherwise. I'll enter the description, and I'll use 6 for the sort number, just keeping things consistent with what I have here with my existing entries. When I'm done, I'll click on the Save button. That new job is added to the list, and I can continue adding additional jobs. So for my second example, I'm going to create a job assignment for OIC. This is an officer in charge. This could be used in situations where if I don't have a supervisor working on a particular shift and I need to move one of my senior people into that supervisory position, I can use a job to do that. So we'll click on the new button again. I'll use OIC as my code. I'll write out the description. And again, the sort number is not a required field. So for this particular example, I may choose to leave it blank or give it a higher number than some of the other jobs that I have in the system. In other words, if I'm always going to use the zones, but I may not always use the officer in charge position or assignment, I would give it a higher sort number so it would appear further down on a list, on the assignment list. Now, some of you might be using a job assignment like this, and some may use it purely for scheduling purposes. Others, it might affect pay. So if your organization is going to use a job assignment like this, and it is going to affect pay, it is important that you assign it a premium code. This is how our system is going to differentiate this job from other jobs like the patrol areas I just created. So I always like to use the same code for my premium code. Now, looking a little further ahead, when it comes time to interface with a payroll system, if you plan on doing this, we can then use this information to say anyone who has worked this OIC job assignment will get additional pay for every hour that they worked it, or maybe it's by day. Okay. And some other examples of job assignments where you might need a premium code might be FTO, Field Training Officer. Now, for those that are building for a municipal type work environment, you may consider using job assignments for pay upgrades. So if you have someone in public works who's going to be driving a forklift during certain hours of the day, and that's going to affect their pay, consider entering a job assignment for them. For example, forklift operator, FLO, might be a perfectly fine code, or you might have something else you currently use to designate that. And again, under the premium code, you want to make sure that you have something in there. Now, the conditions for how someone is paid for one of those upgrades, or how exactly that gets interfaced with your payroll system, comes later during your payroll setup. For now, just make sure that you have a premium code where that's applicable. I'm ready to save my OIC job assignment, and I'm going to create a third example. And I'm going to use this one for light duty. So I'll use LD for the code. You might choose L duty or something similar to that. And again, if this is a job assignment that you may not use as frequently as others, you may choose to give it a higher sort number. Now, light duty probably does not affect pay, but it certainly may affect staffing. In other words, if I had minimum staffing requirements for a particular shift, but I had someone who was on light duty, then they should probably not count towards my minimum staffing requirements. If that is true, make sure that you have omit job from validation. And validation is just another word for minimum staffing requirements, which is something you're going to learn how to build in one of the future online setup classes. And that's class number 6, by the way. Let's click on the Save button, and we're done. Training would be another great example of a job assignment where if someone on one of those shifts is assigned to training, either for the whole day or for the hours that they're on the training job assignment, they should probably not count towards whatever minimum staffing requirements you have. Now, some folks entered this class a bit late, so I just wanted to mention that the job assignments can be applied on a daily, weekly, monthly, or permanent basis. You can even set it for specific hours, so if someone is only covering a particular job for certain hours of their shift, you can absolutely do that. Okay, so that's it for setting up our jobs. Now, towards the end of our class today, I'm going to show you how to create what we call schedule details. They're actually very similar to job assignments, but schedule details are going to be used for things like vehicles, AEDs. They could be used for equipment that you may choose to assign to your people during the course of their work schedules. And what's interesting about schedule details is that you can create your own categories of things that you want to assign. If you want to assign rifles or tasers, you can create your categories, maintain a list or inventory of things within those categories, and then you can assign them as needed. And so, since not everyone chooses to use schedule details, we're going to leave that for the very end of today's class. But for now, I'd like to take any questions anyone has on creating job assignments. Now, we actually have a small group with us, so I didn't have to mute the microphones. But you can also use the chat option if you're just more comfortable with that. So are there any questions on creating jobs at this time? Okay. If there are no questions, we'll go ahead and move on to the next item. Of course, there'll be opportunities for questions afterwards and even opportunities for you to complete this step while I remain on standby with you for anyone that would like to take advantage of that. Okay, so let's close out And we'll move on to the next topic on our agenda, and that is to create our day off reason codes. And so looking again at my patrol day shift, I have an example of an individual here who is out sick. And as you can see, it displays the actual hours that they're out. So this day off may have been applied by a supervisor who took the call from the person, or the individual could have logged on to their system and requested time off. So we're going to use the administration menu to navigate to our Schedule Exception Center. And we're going to select Set Up Day Off Codes. On the left, you're going to see a list of my existing day off codes. And again, these could be applied at the administrative or supervisory level, administrative leave, suspended with pay. These would be great examples of day off types that normally we apply on behalf of others. And even sick might be another example, right? If someone is going to call out sick, they're going to have to call in, and a supervisor would have to post that onto the schedule for you. And then some of the others may be requested by your employees. Vacation, personal, comp are examples of those. I'm going to create an example, but before I do that, we're going to select one of my existing day off entries so you can get an idea of what sort of settings you might need to apply or what fields you might need to complete. And actually, I prefer to do it with sick here. So at the very top, any day off reasons should be active. If you're expecting someone to post that onto the schedule, it needs to be active. If it is unmarked, it means no one is going to be able to use that day off reason. You're going to assign that day off a code. That code is what's going to be used to display that item on the schedule. So as you can see, I have sick in all caps. And that's exactly what we would see on the daily schedule once it's used. Next, we have a description. And you can see examples of how we may have to write out some of those descriptions. And you should have plenty of character length available to write what you need. Under units, your options are hours or days. If you allow that type of time off to be used in hourly increments, make sure it's set to hours, because if you set it to days, that means you're only going to be able to use it in full or half-day increments. And for some of you, you might have a mixture of those. Comp time could be used in hours, vacation could be used in hours, but personal time might be used in days. Next, you're going to select or enter an abbreviation for that day off reason type. Now, your abbreviation is only used in a handful of screens. And I'd like to just minimize this for a moment. We'll come back to it. And I'd like to bring up my yearly schedule here. And actually, even this one isn't really the best example of that. the point is that there's certain schedule views where there's a limit in how much space we have to show the shift or the day off that someone is taking. And that's normally going to be found in your web portal, which is the main interface your basic users will be utilizing. And so if I'm out on a sick day, you might see an S on that particular day because that's what we chose as our abbreviation. It's only one character. It does not have to be unique, so you can use S for several things if you really needed to. But normally we would see S for sick, V for vacation, C for comp time. Next, the checkbox marked Track as Day Off. You're going to have to use this checkbox for any day off where there is a bank associated with that day off reason. So vacation, sick, personal, comp are great examples of day off codes that must have this checkbox marked. And what that means is, again, there's going to be a bank of time associated with it. Every time I use sick time, hours or days will be deducted from a bank, and the bank that will be applied to will be listed below. Now, that bank will be created for you automatically as you're creating the code up top, so you will not have to enter that in manually. Now, examples of day off reasons that you may not track as day off would be funeral leave, suspended with or without pay, bereavement. So some of those day off reasons are things that we are entitled to, but we don't necessarily get a bank of time for that. We just use it as we need it. Now, a common question I get is, if I don't mark track as day off, does that mean I'm not going to be able to run a report and see this time off activity? No, that's not true. Track as day off simply means there's a bank associated. For things like funeral leave, bereavement, things that don't have banks, you will still be able to run reports and view any activity on its usage. Now we're going to move over to the right. You're going to see a series of checkboxes. The only checkbox you'll need to mark at this time is the one labeled Allow to Select from Web. Now remember, most of your basic users and even some of your supervisors are going to be using the web portal for their day-to-day scheduling needs. So if the day off code you're creating is one that they have to have access to, make sure that you mark it. If you do not mark it, that means that that day off will be used to be applied by an administrator, and something like suspended with pay or no pay would be a great example of that, right? No one would ever request that. A supervisor probably wouldn't post that onto the schedule. That would come from an administrator. Now, I have the checkbox marked for sick. Now, you may have a policy within your organization that says if you're going to call out sick, you must talk to someone. So just because we're going to allow you to select that from a list of day off reasons doesn't mean that you no longer have to call in, right? So your policy is still in place, it's still being enforced. But I may have chosen to keep this one available because I might be going into surgery next week and or next month, and I know I'm going to be out for at least a week, so I may choose to schedule that. Now we're going to leave the other checkboxes alone at this time. As you continue going through your basic setup classes and your advanced setup classes, we may need to come back in here and mark additional checkboxes. And we might have to do that because you may choose to automate certain rules for overtime hiring or for payroll processing. And so these checkboxes allow us to do that. But it's a little early to worry about that. So we're going to move on to our color coding at the very bottom. Now, color codes are important because those that are looking at the schedule can easily see whether or not a day off entry has been approved or if it's pending approval. Now, for each day off code, there are 4 approval statuses. Of course, someone is always going to start with a request. A supervisor and administrator will approve. Or if you have a step in your approval process where a supervisor might approve it and then that gets kicked up to someone else, you may choose to use approve with stipulation. And then, of course, we have denied, which would be displayed in red. And so looking at my patrol day shift here on the 23rd, obviously this sick day is approved. Now, VCS recommends that you use a color palette similar to what I have here: green for approved, yellow for approved with stipulation, blue for requested, and red for denied. And the reason why we recommend that is because there are certain parts of our system where these color codes are hard-coded already to green, yellow, blue, and red. So we find it's just easier to choose those colors so that there isn't any confusion. So green might be approved in one screen and then it's going to be purple in another screen. We don't want that. As I said, we already fixed these colors on the web portal, on certain parts of the web portal. So if possible, try to keep that same palette or something very similar to it. Now, I'd like to just show you another example of a day off code that you might use, and this is one for FMLA. And so here what I did is I created an FMLA for sick, and you may end up creating one for FMLA vacation or even more FMLA reason codes. The difference here is that when I created the code, it wanted to create an FMLA-S bank, but instead I linked it to my sick bank. This way it allows me to use a day off reason for FMLA so I can track that separately, but it's going to draw from the sick bank. And I'm going to enter a brand new example. I'm going to click on the new button, and for that example I'm going to use FMLA vacation. So remembering that I have to keep the code at 5 characters or less, I will just choose FMLAV. And you notice once I click on description, it already tried to create a bank for me. But I'm going to continue filling out the rest of my required fields. Oops, that should have said vacation. That will be measured in hours. And the abbreviation I may use here is V for vacation, right? It's still a vacation day. If you want, you can choose F for FMLA. That's perfectly fine as well. Now, I do want to track as day off because that time will be deducted from a bank, but it's certainly not going to come from this bank. It's going to come from my vacation bank. Over on the right, I'm going to remember to allow to select from web if I want my users to have access to that day off reason. And at the bottom, I'm going to assign my colors. I'm going to use the buttons just above the sample text, so I'll click on Approved. I'm going to choose a green color. For Approve with Stipulation, I'll choose yellow. For Request, I'll use this blue. Actually, I'll use this one up top. And in fact, I might even change the font color just to make it a little easier to read, because black on blue might be a little difficult for some folks to see. And for denied, I'll use red. Click OK, and I might do the same thing here just to make it a little easier to read. Once I'm done, I'll click on the Save button up top. After you create your first day off code, you'll notice that if you remain in this screen and click on the New button again, after you've filled out the form, when you click on any one of these buttons for the colors, it's going to leave the last color you used, not exactly highlighted, but you'll see a small border around it. And so you know you're selecting the same exact color that you used for the last entry. Okay, before I close out of this screen, at some point you will have to upload everyone's balances into their banks. And that should be the last time you have to do that. One of the many features that we offer is the ability to create rules for how people accrue time based on years of service, and even what contract or what groups they belong to. So within your organization, you might have several groups of people that accrue time differently, or maybe even accrue time at different times. So you will have that capability. And that's about all we have for entering day off code. So once again, I'd just like to invite anyone to ask any questions they have on entering a day off code. And again, the mics are open, or you can use the chat option if you're more comfortable with that. Okay, there doesn't seem to be any questions at this time. Okay. Oh, there will be a question. Okay, I'll give it another minute. I'm sorry, I'm not completely clear on the question. As far as entering data on a yearly basis, are you referring to the actual banks of time that people are given? Yes, at some point you will have to enter everyone's balances, and I'll close this screen out for now. I can always come back to it later if we need to. But under the administration drop-down menu, there's a screen called Manage Time Banks. And so you're going to use this screen to select the people within your department, the banks that you want to work with, and I'll just choose the first four here: vacation, sick, personal, and comp. And you're going to leave that set to add, subtract, bank. Now, when you click on the refresh button, it's going to show each person's name with the bank and an adjustment amount. So this is where you're going to key in how much time everyone has in their banks just before you're getting ready to go live. Now, our system, of course, is not going to know what this is, right, because these folks were given time on January 1st and they've been burning it all this time. So you'll have to manually key this in, and at the very bottom, once you're done with everyone, you're going to set the effective date for when they can start using that time. So let's say, just for the sake of argument, November 1st is going to be your go live date. Well, you want to make sure you upload the banks, enter what that effective date is, and enter a reason like time off, balance, upload. Something very simple like that. The moment you click apply, each employee will have access to that time bank for any time off dated after November 1st. Okay. Now, when you get to your advanced training classes, you're going to learn how to set up their time off accrual rules. That's going to be found under the admin drop-down menu. We'll just take a very high-level look at this. But the name of the screen is called Allotted Days Off by Step Rules. Under your workgroup selection screen, you're going to select the work group or contractual group you want to work with. So I have sort of more of a police-oriented schedule that I'm running. So I have PBA people and SOA people. So if I select PBA and then I select the type of day off I want to work with, like vacation, it allows me to set up the rules for how much time these guys are going to accrue based on years of service. So as they move up, those allotments will change, and you will be able to apply those, on January 1st or on a monthly basis or by pay period. So the system will handle the automatic allotment of the time from this point going forward. The only thing you will have to do manually is at the very beginning of each year, you're just going to have to roll over whatever unused time you're allowing them to bring over. Now, under timesheets and payroll, under end of year rollover, what you're going to do is, on your first day back in January, you're going to select your group of employees, just the banks of time you're allowing them to carry over, you want the current year or the past year actually to be reflected here. So if you were doing this on January 2017, this should be set to 2016. And you're going to click on the refresh button. Okay. Now over on the right, you're just going to enter what it is that you did. Roll over from 2016 to 2017. Okay. So below, you're going to choose the effective date. This is when they can begin using that time. And that's it. So that's really the only manual adjustment you're going to have to take care of. So, all of that, again, just a high-level overview of what's to come. Okay. Now, are there any other questions on entering day off codes? Okay. All right, let's close that out. Now we're going to talk about overtime reason codes and pay types associated with overtime. So we're going to stick with the Schedule Exception Center. And we're going to take a look at a screen called Setup Pay Types. Every time someone works overtime, whether they do it at the end of their work shift or if it's overtime that was assigned to them, perhaps for a staffing shortage, there will have to be a pay type associated with that overtime entry. On top of that, we may end up using pay types to handle things like holiday pay, but to keep things simple for now, your pay types should include a time and a half cash, possibly a time and a half comp. If there's any situation where I would be paid straight time for working overtime, maybe I didn't complete enough hours in the week or in the pay cycle, you may need a straight cash and a straight pay type, a straight comp type in there as well. So each pay type has to have a code, a description that is easily understood by the person that is requesting the overtime payment, the method, the factor, and if you're creating a comp time or a time-based pay type, a bank where that time will get applied towards. So let's put in two examples. Let's say there are situations where certain types of overtime are paid at double time. Now, whatever the conditions of that might be, I need a pay type for it. So let's click on the New button. I'm going to enter a code of 5 characters or less. So I'll use 2.0 C4 cache. I have a little bit more character length available here. I'll leave the method set to cache and the factor set to 2. And when I'm done, I click on the Save button and it's added to the list. Let's create another one. And here's my double time comp or time pay type. And so the moment I click on time, it's asking me, okay, well, for anyone that's accruing this time, what bank is it going to get thrown in so that they can actually use it? Well, for me, that might be comp time. Now, some of you might actually use a separate pay type for training time. If I'm attending a training class on my regular day off, you might give me 8 hours of training time, and that's just time that I can schedule off for a future date. But you may keep that separate from your comp banks. You know, one might be able to get rolled over from year to year, the other one may not. So if you're going to use something like training time, don't drop it into the comp bank. Make sure that you have a training day off code in there, right? That way that employee can use it. And so when you create your pay type, I can just call this training time. I'll use the time option again, but this time I'll just link it to a different day off code. And mine just happened to be called training time, or I use TRT for the code. This way, you're placing the time directly into the bank, but you're keeping it separate from comp in case there's different rules for how people can accrue or use that time. Now again, when you're creating pay types, don't be concerned so much with the conditions for when something gets paid at a certain rate. You just need to make sure that you have all possible payment options listed here. Now that we have our pay types, we're going to close out and we're going to enter the Setup Overtime Code screen. Over on the left are all of the overtime reasons I want to track in my system. The more overtime reasons you have, the better the reports you're going to get later on. Now, using my staffing shortage overtime code as an example, my code is going to be 5 characters or less, just as it was before. Enter your description. Units, I can't imagine any reason why you would select anything other than hours, but you do have the choice. And at the bottom, at the very bottom here, you'll see the different pay types that we have. This allows you to select what are the available pay types for that particular type of overtime reason. And I can think of one example where you might need this. If you're going to be using our system for grant overtime, maybe that only pays out in cash. So you would only mark the cash pay types. To the left of the available pay types, you have a color code. Now, unlike day off reasons, there's only one color for overtime. So you may just want to choose a color that is different enough from the ones you're using for time off, just so that there's no confusion, so that when those get posted on there, those looking at the schedule can tell the difference between time off and overtime. Now I'm going to enter an example, but before I do that, I would just like to show you my court overtime code. You'll notice for that one, I have this field marked mandatory hours callback set to 2. And we see this a lot for things like court overtime. What this means is that this pays out a minimum of 2 hours whenever it's used. And you might have other types of call-in related overtime where there is a minimum. If I was in court for a half hour, I'm still getting paid as if I was there for 2 hours. Just keep in mind that the 2 hours will be applied across the board. So if court is being used for someone's regular day off, that's fine. But if I'm going to court at the end of my work schedule, maybe I don't get 2 hours. Maybe I get whatever I actually work. If that's the case, you'll need a separate overtime reason for that. Okay. So you can have, a court 2 hours and like a court shift extended type overtime reason. You just will have to abbreviate it for the code, but you can write it out under the description. Let's click on the New button, and I'm going to use this example for my late call overtime. Someone's working late at the end of their shift. They have to tell us when, what date, the reason for their overtime. So we'll create one for late call. Okay. Something happened at the last minute. It extended my shift. I'm going to leave that set to hours. For the abbreviation, I can use L for late call, C for call, or just O for overtime if you want to keep it general. And I can either leave all overtime pay types available, in which case I would just leave this alone, or if I choose to mark these two, that means those are the only ones that will be available. When you're done, click on the Save button. And for mine here, I'm keeping most of my overtime codes set to black, just because again, just to keep them looking different from the day off reasons. Okay, so at this time, are there any questions about creating overtime codes or the pay types that are associated with them? No questions so far. All right, folks. As promised, I'd like to take a look at those schedule details. So for anyone who might be interested in assigning vehicles or equipment to their people, we're going to use our list center under the admin menu. And the name of the screen is called Setup Schedule Details List. Now, I already have a category for my cars, and so for each category, you'll have a list of items, and just like the jobs, they can be assigned in multiple ways, and that can also be reported on. So let's create a brand new one. I'm going to create a brand new category. So up top, let's click on the New button. And maybe I want to assign rifles. Let's click on the OK button. It gives you a blank grid below. And under the description, you're just going to type in the items. Rifle 1. And I always like to use the same label for the description and the additional information field. Now, as you're typing in the items, you'll notice that another blank line appears below it. So there's no limit to how many items you can have under a particular category. And you can also choose to sort them in a particular option, otherwise it'll do it alphabetically. When you're done, click on the Save button and create additional categories or use the screen to add additional items to an existing one. Let's close out of this screen. And so one of the things you're going to learn in, not in Class 3, but in Class 4, is you're going to learn how to create a desktop dashboard, very similar to what I have on the screen right now. And you're going to learn that you can customize these a number of different ways. And one of the things you're going to be able to do is include those schedule details that you created. So if anyone on a particular shift is assigned to that schedule detail that you created, that information will now be displayed for everyone to see. So earlier, when we first got started, I showed you this screen here called Manage Daily Assignments, which is a favorite of our shift supervisors because they select the shift that they're covering. They select the category of things that they want to assign, like the rifles that I just created, and they just assign everyone over. Maybe I'll choose someone else because he's on a day off. And now when I close out that screen, as soon as the window has the opportunity to refresh, those assignments will be displayed on the schedule. That's an interesting little tool. And so that's how we create schedule details. Now, that is the end of what we had on the agenda for this morning. We still have plenty of time for any questions that you may have on any of the topics from this morning. So I'd be happy to take any questions. Again, it's a small group. Nothing so far. Okay. as a reminder, when there is a confirmation email that is sent out, within that email you will see a link to a document called Basic Setup 2 Guide, which includes screenshots and everything that we've covered this morning. And I think you can actually get it from GoToTraining. There should be a category called Materials where you can find it where it says Basic Setup 2 under Materials. If you click on it, it will allow you to save it anywhere on your desktop computer. Also in that email, you will receive a link to today's video. So you just have to register, put in the same information you did for this class, and you will have access to that video. It'll even send you another email so that you can send that to other people. So if there's anyone else that might be responsible for data entry and they weren't able to attend the class, you can just distribute that email with that video to anyone you wish. Okay. There doesn't seem to be any questions, so thank you so much for your time this morning. I appreciate it. I will remain on standby for another few minutes for anyone else that might need further assistance in entering these items into your system. For class number 3, some of you are attending those at different dates and times, but for class number 3, you're going to learn how to build your shifts, like the patrol day and patrol night shifts that you just saw. And you're also going to learn how to create the schedule rotations. Those are the work patterns that define when people are on those shifts. And so for many of you, that might be your squads or platoons. Okay, so thank you so much, and please enjoy the rest of your day. And again, I'll just be on standby for a couple of minutes for anyone who might need it. Thanks a lot, guys. Thank you very much. Thank you.